Welcome everybody to today's session on UiPath Academic Alliance Educator Panel. So Aria, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yep.
Right, so this discussion today is just going to start, I'm going to start with introductions, and then Aria is going to lead the questions that we have for the panel. I'm going to ask the panel to kind of give you a little bit about their background, who they are, what schools they teach in, those types of things. And then we would love to get some questions and comments from you. So if you want to go to the next slide. So today on the call, this is our team. We have Gaurav Shekhar, who is a senior assistant dean at the University of Texas at Dallas. We have Jim Litley, who's a professor at Rutgers University, and we have Zain Ali, who's a professor at Texas Christian University. So Zain hasn't quite joined us yet, but we're hoping he does. We're going to get started here anyway. I'm, again, Diana Gray. I'm the Senior Community Marketing Manager for America at UiPath. And we have Aria Morales, who's our Program Manager with the Academic Alliance at UiPath. So why don't we get started? Gaurav, would you mind doing an introduction on yourself and just letting us know a little bit about you?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and welcome to everybody who's joined this webinar. My name is Gaurav Shekhar. I'm the Senior Assistant Dean for Graduate Programs here at the University of Texas at Dallas. I'm also an Assistant Professor of Instruction in the Information Systems area, and I teach courses around business intelligence, robotic process automation, sustainability analytics, etc. Particularly when it comes to UiPath, I've been using this in my robotic process automation graduate class for the last 3 years now. There are a lot of great things. We'll talk about it in the course of it, but very happy to be here.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I also want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak today and share what I've learned. My name is Jim Litley. I'm faculty at Rutgers Business School. I retired from a career in public accounting in 2017 and started teaching at Rutgers in 2018 in the principally graduate school. And I think from 2018, because my team at KPMG, we used UiPath Studio. So I knew already we were doing some things around RPA, and so I knew it was something that was relevant for my students. So pretty much from 2018 began to incorporate that into my course, which is an accounting in the digital era course. We cover a number of things, and that's evolved, right? So now, as we've seen what's happened with artificial intelligence, I'm doing process mining, RPA, looking forward to incorporating agentic AI. I also teach audit analytics, and in the fall, I'll be teaching undergraduates for the first time. So really excited about the resources that UiPath has been able to provide to be able to integrate that into my curricula. And like I said, looking forward to sharing kind of my experiences.
Great. Thank you so much. And then Ari, I'm going to let you give a little bit of a background on yourself too and what you do with the academic program.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Aria Morales. I am a program manager for the Academic Alliance at UiPath. My main focus has been with Canada and Latin America. So it's joining efforts with the rest of the America team and the global program to get all of this content into the classrooms in universities and academic institutions in Latin America. And well, we're very thankful on behalf of the team. Thank you so much, Professor Jim and Professor Gaurav for joining us. This is our second panel. And I just want to add that this is something that we wanted to create for you, for professors, so that we could give a space where you can communicate, where you can ask questions, where you can really interact and share your challenges, share any feedback. So we really want this to be an open space and an open discussion where you can put any questions that you have in the chat. If you feel comfortable coming off of mute and asking directly, please do so. We do have a couple of questions prepared, but I kind of wanted that to be a conversation starter. So this is very much for you, and thank you so much for being here. We can begin. So our first question is, what considerations influence your decision to include the Automation Business Analyst Associate content in your courses? And Jim, if you don't mind taking it away.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I think in the market, having spent a career in public accounting, I think it's important for students to be able to prove essentially that they've learned what they need to learn around these software tools. So the certification programs, I think, are awesome. And I tell my students, get the certifications, get the digital credentials, get them posted in your LinkedIn profiles. So to me, it's one thing to say on your resume, I'm familiar and knowledgeable about UiPath, Studio Web, etc. But when an employer, prospective employer, can look and see that you've actually earned those credentials, I think that's huge. So that's from a student-facing perspective. I think it's important for them. From an educator perspective, I think it's tremendous that UiPath has developed the various curricula that I can easily incorporate and have in my courses. So that's just less work for me. So I think the content, from my perspective, is hugely valuable, especially in today's era with a lot of asynchronous. I have in-person and asynchronous sections. But even in some of my in-person sections, it's one day a week in person, the other day is asynchronous. So again, I think students after COVID are used to learning via asynchronous content. And so again, the content and not just the learning paths around the credentials for UiPath, but as I said when we were speaking before, I'm having my students go through 5 Studio Web courses. They're also, earning those badges around those courses. So again, it allows me to focus on the education part about where and why you need to incorporate RPA, not the ins and outs of how to do it in a particular software tool. I do get a chance to have guest lectures from the Big Four firms, and I still have contacts in the Big Four firms. And so I know what technology tools they have in their stacks. And UiPath is one of those. There are others, right? So it's not, there are multiple RPA solutions out there. But again, as I tell my students, I choose the software that I cover based on what I hear Gartner or Reed, Gartner, Forrester. What are those leading practice low code, no code software tools? That's why I incorporate it. So, again, I feel like obviously I've said a lot more than just that question. But at the end of the day, to incorporate that into my course, have the students go through it, and at the end, they get a credential or multiple credentials, I think is hugely valuable.
Thank you so much. Yes. And Gaurav?
I think I share Professor Litley's practitioner view on this, because at the end of the day, what are we teaching these tools or these courses for? We want to make our students employable. Employability is critical for us. And before we introduce any courses or any tools, we do a very thorough analysis of what's relevant in the industry through our advisory boards, through our different connections that we have in the industry. We want to make sure that students are learning what's more applicable. We do use some additional, I would say, tools like Lightcast, for example, that helps us understand where are the jobs. And in those jobs, what are the tools that they're asking for? And UiPath used to come up a lot of times when you talk about automation. Of course, it's, if you look at the Gartner quadrant, it's right there on the top. So that was the reason why we incorporated the tool. And then the next thing was, in my particular course, I don't use the content exactly the way it is laid out in a particular learning plan. Like, for example, the Business Analyst Associate. It's a very customized learning plan for students, which has different tools and softwares. But before we even teach our students exactly how to use the tool, there is, the thought process of how automation really fits in into the larger scheme of things is what they need to be taught. And that's where some of the modules that are there as part of the Business Analyst Associate, the learning plans was very relevant to what we wanted to teach them. I would say one thing that we incorporate in our courses is, so we have about 45 hours of instructional time in a semester. And that is not enough to cover everything that we feel that they should know. So I feel that sometimes these, and I'll take the example of Business Analyst Associate, they provide some self-learning opportunities. And what we tell students is, okay, go ahead, go through these videos or go through this content before you come to class. Because in class, we're going to use maybe some very specific use cases, very specific examples of putting that knowledge to test. So for us, that ancillary preparedness on top of what an instruction can provide them is where this content has become very useful for us. And again, these are high quality lectures. Students feel comfortable following them. If there are some exercises that they have to go through themselves, they're able to do that very well. But I feel the preparedness is what it has really helped us with. So that the 3 hours that they spend in the class is utilized very well for some, real life case studies or something that helps them put that knowledge to test.
Yes, and it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because it's one of the challenges that we have as Academic Alliance now, that some of the learning plans are 45 hours long, and then you need 30 hours for practice. So when Business Analysts came out, for us it was a little bit of a better, not a better resource, but it was one more resource that our professors could hopefully implement easier than the other track that we have, that is Automation Developer. And because of the timing, it's a very real challenge, I think. And we commend you for using this and for finding the way around it, and for choosing which content it's better to implement into your classrooms. That's also why we have to maintain our flexibility and be able to give you as professors the option to decide, what content you're gonna bring into the classroom and what fits better into your curriculum. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a very important aspect. Is there anybody in the chat that has any questions or anything that they want to add? Oh, okay. So
I would like to add one thing, which is
Yeah.
Something that you brought up and I've heard from other people in the industry, which is you have the students take that self-learning prior to going to some of the classes, and the quality of the UiPath content is very good. And the videos are good. The fact that they time things, so it might be one lesson's 20 minutes or an hour, is upfront, so people know exactly how long it should take. And then the other thing that's nice about it is it does have quizzes and
Yes.
throughout, so that people can go back, try it again, continually, because I use the same curriculum. And I hear that from a lot of people, both at UiPath and in the community. It doesn't matter what age you are or what level you are, we are using the same curriculum to learn this material, which I find fascinating, and I find it very good as well.
Thank you, Diana. Yes. So let's continue with the next question. Like, what method did you find the most effective for integrating this content into your courses? And if you encountered any challenges, how did you navigate them? I know that we briefly already spoke a little bit about this, but if you can.
Is that for me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
whoever
sure.
wants to take it on. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, as I was saying before, before this Zoom, I started, we had used UiPath Studio with my team at KPMG. And, so when I started in 2018, Studio X, I think, was probably, the challenge that we run is we only have 45 hours. And so how much can you cover? And by the way, this RPA is a part of a broader course that I teach, right? This accounting in the digital era. We cover lots of different technologies. So, one of the challenges is how do you pick and choose the content that's going to get the student prepared to be able to, through experiential learning, apply the technology, right? And so, in Studio X, I started out with the students learning Studio X, and then they had a group project, an RPA group project. And I had them choose their own project, or if they were stuck, I would give them a project. And one of the ones, because I spent the bulk of my career in forensic accounting, did a lot of financial statement fraud investigations, manual journal entries, principal means by which management can override internal controls, is a very big area. And it's also one that lends itself for RPA. So I would have students do the project around if they wanted to go with the project I recommended, it was around manual journal entries. I created data for them to do it. We had students do procure to pay, three-way match, those types of things, but traditional RPA ready type cases. But it was a challenge that for the students to learn the software and then develop the project. So, and that was with Studio X. And it was interesting. Again, I'm going back to 2018. A few years ago, I had a student in my class that had done an internship where they used Studio, not Studio X. And he was able to help his group actually do a project around tax returns and scraping data, which was something that wasn't being done with Studio X. And so when they presented their group project, the other students were blown away. And it was that kind of that aha moment where they said, wow, this is really powerful. And because again, one of the challenges is we've only got 45 hours. And even if you have them learn on their own, one of the reasons that I, see the opportunity here is I'm developing an RPA specific course where my hope is a lot of my students that have had my prior two courses know UiPath, and then they move into the RPA course and they're just doing the application. So I think time is a little bit of a challenge in a semester. And by the way, I think if you dedicate a full semester just to RPA, you could do it. But if you're mixing other things, I think it becomes harder. So, again, I did group projects originally, and there was a lot of pushback from students that it was too much work. But it was graduate school, right? So, the expectation is that you've been around and this is something that you've got more domain knowledge than an undergraduate. So it's really just where and how to apply it. But as UiPath has added to their content, et cetera, and then with Studio Web, the last few semesters, what I've done is had the students go through the Automation Business Analyst Associate learning, but then I've also added 5 Studio Web courses that they go through. And how I've done it is so again, it's all learning on my part as well. Initially, if they submitted the credential that they earned, the badge that they earned, I would give them 100 for that particular grading assignment. And I did that for one semester, and then I said, I'm not sure. I forget what Mikhail told me UiPath uses for the knowledge check to pass, whether that's 80% or whatever. Right. The
it
number of
depends.
knowledge checks. How much?
Most of them is about 80%
Yes.
to pass, but you have multiple tries.
Right. So I now started to build Canvas quizzes that replicate the knowledge checks that UiPath has built in, because I want the students to retain it. And so I tell them, look, once you complete the module, the UiPath Automation Business Analyst Associate module, immediately take the Canvas quiz. You should get 100, unless you didn't really learn the material through the UiPath learning plan. So now, for that particular assignment, they get an average of what they get on the quiz versus the 100, because I don't know whether they got an 80 and just passed and got their diploma, or they got 100, right? So I started to do that. And then on the Studio Web, the same thing. I've replicated the knowledge check questions in Canvas quizzes so that students now they'll get their credential, but then were they really paying attention? Were they just kind of redoing the quiz, the knowledge check in UiPath to get it? Have they retained it? So I've done a little bit of now with these quizzes. And the next level that I was speaking with UiPath about is how can I, build out some more kind of experiential case studies. And so that's one of the things that, to be determined, but some of the things that, for example, the courses that I think are most relevant for my students, there are 5 that I cover, but build your first automation in Studio Web, repetitive and rule-based tasks in Studio Web, document data extraction and manipulation in Studio Web. So those, actually data validation and processing in Studio Web. Those are the 3, because again, I'm looking at, most of my students are going to be future, they want to work in accounting, CPAs, or for companies. So I look at those 3 as being kind of the core, and then I've added the email and the document data extraction. But what I want to do is develop some case studies where they've got to build, say, a data validation and processing or a document data extraction. They've got to build that automation using Studio Web, and then I'm going to give them sample data and they're going to have to execute that, right? And so then I can maybe develop some quiz questions that is going to be unique, because the reality is students today are using ChatGPT to find some of this stuff. So I'm trying to eliminate that, almost to force them to learn. And I will tell you, just jumping ahead, how students responded. One of the most consistent bits of feedback I get from my students is, we really appreciate you covering these software tools, that we're learning these software tools, and they know when they're interviewing with public accounting firms, but even with some of my students that already work in public companies, these tools, UiPath among others, are in their stack, right? So they know that they're going to have the opportunity to apply that if they can get access to the software. So this continues to evolve. I think ultimately what I want to get to is, you get your credentials, you do your asynchronous learning, offline learning, whatever you want to call it, and then you're going to do more case studies as part of the course. So, again, I'm looking forward now to agentic AI. I think that opens up huge opportunities. The other thing that I was doing was starting to develop critical thinking questions around automation, right? Because I think that also is a good reinforcement mechanism for students to understand it, right? It's one thing to understand, how do I build this automation? But the critical thinking as, what's the impact of that automation? Or what gap is being met in the business process with that automation? I always talk about standardize, optimize, and automate. I know within AI that's kind of changing, because the AI can do some of that optimization. But again, I think as this area continues to evolve, UiPath has continued to evolve the curricula, and I agree with Diana. I have found, and we'll see in the fall when I teach undergraduates, but I found that your content resonates with people with all different types of backgrounds. Again, graduate students coming, graduating in May, having my course in July, or people that have been working for 5 or 10 years and they're looking to reskill and upskill and get a master's in accountancy degree. So sorry, long-winded way of answering your question there, but I touched on a couple. So
No, but very thorough, and it's very interesting to see how you have adapted the different courses and the different changes within the technology, because that's one of the things, right? It continuously updates, so it's keeping up with it. That's also part of the challenge. So it's very interesting, Jim. Thank you so much. Gaurav, do you want to share as well?
Sure. I think our approaches are very similar, which I find fascinating. For us as well, this is not a UiPath class. Let's put it this way. This is a graduate course on RPA, and we want to teach students system integration. A lot of times when they come to class, they see like 2 sentences on the slide, and that's what is the context for the entire class. They have to work on a solution just based on those 2, because we're teaching them to be consultants, and a lot of times they don't get very well fleshed out requirements of what needs to be built. So our conversations are around deciphering what those few sentences from your clients could mean and how do you go about it. What we have found out, apart from the fact that we pick and choose certain modules from different courses, I think, yes, there are certain things that we want to cover as part of the course. So students get to pick and choose from different modules or tracks, as you might say. But what I'm told most of the times is based on a student's interest, even after the class, they kind of sometimes continue on a certain path. So let's say for the class, they might have just viewed some videos or lectures that was worth maybe 5 hours or 7 hours for a certain topic. But that area was of interest to them, and they, after the class or within the course of the class, they kind of continue on that path. So this ancillary learning that's happening with students, we are just introducing them to some topics, but then they end up continuing their journey. And we want that because at the end of the day, we want to give them some flexibility in terms of, hey, you can continue on what you like to do, what you envision yourself doing. We will introduce you to certain concepts in the context of what this class is about. Of course, we can't fit the entire RPA into a 45-hour course, but we at least give them something, some critical understanding of some concepts based on, number one, what kind of jobs are there in the industry? Number two, what kind of skills and the level of skills they're looking for, so that they at least get the ability to work on those things with us in the class, and then based on their interest, they can pursue it. One of the challenges, since you mentioned about challenges, is the motivation. To be very honest, what keeps them motivated? Okay, is this, what, assignments are very motivating. The minute you know this is going to count for a grade, oh wow, it is motivating. But let's give it. Students in this day and age are taking too many courses, and being a student, whether you are a part-time student, is still a full-time job in a way, because you're spending all that time. So we are cognizant of it. What I would say is towards the end of my course, and they would have learned several tools. They would have learned something around workflows. They would have learned something around automation. They would have learned something around even application development at the very beginning of the semester, something around business processes, testing, and there might be multiple tools. We put them into a 2-week automation hackathon. We give them a problem statement, which is sponsored by one of our partners here in the industry. And sometimes there are multiple partners, but they are made aware of a statement. And then 2 weeks from that time, they have to come back and present a solution. Sometimes these statements are hardly maybe half a page to a page long, because again, we want them to interpret the problem statement the way they have understood it. They have the flexibility of using whatever tools that they want from the class and take it forward themselves. When the day comes that they have to do the presentation, at that point of time, we ensure that there are at least 5 different industry folks from different companies that are there to evaluate their work and give them feedback. These are people who have never seen their work before, so that's a first opportunity for both the sides, the judges as well as the students, to present their work. Finally, what we also do is, certification is important. But as a public institution, we can't say that, hey, you must take a certain certification. So to encounter the challenge around that, what we tell them is, okay, if you complete a certification, there is extra credit for it. So let's say tomorrow, somebody say that I don't want to spend my time doing a certification. No problem. You don't lose points, but that extra credit sometimes helps. And because that extra credit is towards the end of the semester, a lot of times students know that maybe the grade that they want between that and where they stand, there is a significant gap, and maybe the certification will help. I have seen that there is always a good chunk of students that might not pursue that certification right then at the end of the semester, because again, remember, they are into this full-time business of taking classes. They end up doing it after a month or so, and that's okay for us. Till the time they are finishing it, that's all we want. So I think we have our unique opportunities. I don't think there are any challenges really. And we do encourage a lot of peer learning in the class, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to work on these projects just by themselves. So how do you ideate? How do you think about a process? I mean, there's so much of scratch work that goes on, whether they use our, I mean, luckily I end up teaching in a classroom that has multiple whiteboards, and every board has at least 3 groups standing, on one corner with their markers and just fleshing out a solution. That's the kind of stuff we teach in the class, because we want to replicate what they're going to do in the industry in that classroom setting. And specifically, students who have lesser experience are the ones that benefit the most from this, because they are the ones who are very anxious about how does it feel like to work on these kind of projects in the industry. So trying to simulate it is something that we have figured out is a good way of making them prepared for these kind of skills. That is what I have to say. Yeah.
No, and it's very interesting that you mentioned the hackathon part, because I think we recently had another school in Michigan that also did a hackathon, and we had the participation of industry people. So that the fact that I think it really helps the motivation for the students, because they are seeing that their solutions have a real life impact, and that they're able to present it to potential employers. I think it's interesting that, and it's very important for us that we're seeing that type of initiative within the universities and with our professors as well. So I'm
And
glad.
just to add to that, even the judges that come, sometimes they have also not looked at their own problems that same way. When they see these solutions, they are also intrigued by the thinking of the students, because these are a fresh set of eyes on problems that they have been working on a very regular basis, and probably they're antiquated in terms of how they think. But they also see, when they look at a presentation and they see a proof of concept, they're able to now see how these tools also place in the larger scheme of things as to what is possible with these tools. And always, for the last whatever years I've been doing this, I always have 100% of the judges come back and have side conversations about, okay, if we have to build a practice around this, or we have to kind of use these tools in our organizations, can you help us can you sit with our teams and talk about how we can incorporate it? Again, at the end of the day, folks that they want to bring on board to work on these solutions, the most natural candidates are the students who just showed them the solution a few months ago.
Exactly.
And that's the best part of it, because we want these students to be placed.
Exactly. Yes.
And why not do it this way? So yeah, there's a lot of benefit in having this multi-headed engagement, where you have students, you have industry, and then you have academic programs like the way UiPath provides us with resources.
Gaurav, are the business cases or the thing you're solving for, are those determined by the students or by the industry for you?
So that's with the industry. Generally, what they do is they will just come up with a fair idea of what the problem looks like.
Okay, so they provide that before the hackathon?
They would sponsor that. They are kind of the problem statement sponsors.
I love that.
And this is, most of the times, this is an actual ongoing problem that they need a solution for.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I wanted to just address the question. I think Dan O'Leary, thank you so much for joining us. Dan is from USC here at California. And yes, I think that the learning plan that you were looking at is a previous version of it. Right now we have the associate and the professional version of business analyst, and that is something that it has really helped us, because it's about 15 hours or so of content, versus I think the learning plans that we used before was the previous role, which was the developer, and that one was about 45 hours of content, 35 hours, plus needed like about 30 or so hours of practice. So that's why also this learning plan is a little bit more or probably easier, or hopefully brings a little bit more flexibility into what to implement in the courses. I just wanted to, I see, Jim, that you also posted the link, but I wanted to mention it here as well. I don't know that if you want to have another question, then please feel free to come off mute if you like, or you can share in the chat as well. And we already thank you, Dan. So we already spoke about this a little bit, but I don't want to if you want to expand on this, what additional concepts do you incorporate into your courses alongside the Business Analyst Associate material? Like, I know we have professors, for example, April Morris, that also uses Alteryx and Tableau within her classes in Power BI. So if you want to share some of that as well.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
No problem.
I cover in my audit analytics class, I cover Alteryx and also Tableau for visual analytics. And I actually have the students do a visual analytics group project using Tableau accelerators. And so Tableau accelerators have data built in, or I've also developed data that would largely fit the accelerator. So students have to use the Tableau mapper to be able to map the data to the accelerator. And really the goal there is leveraging Tableau's data guide function. So again, going back to 2018, I had students build visualizations and dashboards and then do a group project similar to what I did with UiPath Studio X. And again, in just one semester, you don't have enough calendar time for them to learn the software, to build the tools that they're going to use, and then to apply them. So, the shortcuts help in terms of cutting down the time. So, and then in this accounting and digital era course, I also do Tableau. There's a visual analytics group project because I think that's huge, visual analytics, especially for auditing. This year, I've incorporated Celonis process mining, which fits very nice with RPA. Process mining can identify opportunities for RPA. And then what I talked about with Studio Web now and the Automation Analyst Associate program. But I'm developing to your question. I believe there's a huge opportunity, and I'm not sure it's probably going to be on the audit analytics course. Huge opportunity to have students say use UiPath to extract data on a regular basis. So developing a case study where there's monthly data that they have to extract over 18 months in an automated fashion using UiPath, using Alteryx to transform, cleanse, and analyze the data, and then ultimately using UiPath again to go back and push that output from Alteryx into, say, dashboards in Tableau, right? So I think the great thing is I tell my students, listen, if they wanted to be coders or programmers, they would have chosen a different master's program, right? This is a master's of accountancy. And so I'm all about low code, no code tools. And like I said, the tools that we're talking about today, in addition to UiPath, they're all leading practice low code, no code tools. Whether you're looking at Gartner or Forrester, they're going to be in the upper right. So I do see, and I'm really excited to see what happens with agentic automation. I just think the potential, and again, as we all continue to evolve our curricula, again, as we're preparing, and I'm very much a believer, I share Garv's view, I've not come from the academic side, right? I come from professional practice. I believe one of the primary goals that we need to accomplish or meet is preparing our students for the future of accounting work or future of work, right? Depending on whether this is an accounting, finance, or supply chain class. But to prepare them for the future of work is AI, right? And agentic AI is probably the next stage. So I think as the tools evolve, the use cases become more broad, more compelling. I see more opportunity to integrate more tools. So right now, I kind of cover these tools individually just because the time in the semester. I don't have time in the courses that I'm teaching right now, but I could see like a graduate level capstone course where you could pull this together and have students, use 3 or 4 of these tools to meet the objectives that I described. So I think I like Gaurav said, I very much believe our job, I look at my job as a curator of information. I believe my job is not necessarily to teach the students how to learn to use the software. It's really to show them where and how these tools are applicable and what areas they relate to, right? So again, in the accounting profession, um, whether that's auditing or cost or managerial accounting, all of these tools that we've been talking about are very, very relevant. And we just need, as educators, we need to stay on top of that and continue to evolve our curricula as the tools and the capabilities evolve. So I think, future course, I'll be adding agentic AI. I do cover agentic AI right now from a concept perspective. I'm looking forward to having students learn to apply it. So yeah, I think depending on the course, there are a lot of concepts that relate that I think we need to cover. It's a question of how much time do you have in a semester to cover it all. And in accounting, programs, there's limited bandwidth, right? They only have so many credits that they can devote to things that are not, intermediate accounting, cost accounting, auditing, et cetera. So it's not like even though I'm working on developing additional courses, it's a very narrow range that you can slip those courses in. So one of the things that I've talked about with my colleagues at Rutgers is we need to identify those foundation courses, identify opportunities for experiential learning with leading practice software tools, right? So I think in the cost accounting course, visual analytics can be very relevant. RPA can be very relevant, right? But um, different educators are comfortable with different technologies, and so that's an evolution, right? Just like we're seeing in the workforce, like we're seeing with students. I think our educators also need to reskill and upskill to be able to better incorporate the use of these technology tools. Because again, I think we owe it to our students when they get to work in industry, uh, they'll be better off for knowing where and how to apply these technology tools in these areas. So, yeah, I think uh, our limitation is the course that we're teaching and also, how we're covering the other traditional accounting courses, in these undergraduate and graduate degree programs. I think that's really our limitation, the challenge that we need to overcome as educators.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Jim. Gaurav?
Again, I have to start my answer by saying I agree with what Jim said, because absolutely see, if this course that we teach, if this was all about, sure, just incorporate everything that's there in the, UiPath Academy and just teach it that way, students will quickly ask us, then what is our role? What are we doing? Because the content is available, the videos are high quality, there is assessment, they can do things themselves. Our job really is to curate what is happening in the industry. And what's happening in the industry is not happening in silos. There's no one organization that is just using UiPath or just using A, B, or C. And that system integration, that ability to look at cases, that ability to look at problems that are happening now as of today, is what we are trying to simulate in our classes. So for example, I don't jump into automation immediately. I'd start with application development. But should I need to teach them programming languages and spend a whole amount of time on that? No, I use a low-code, no-code tool there as well. And I use Appian to start with application development. Then UiPath is there for automation. I also use Alteryx for any kind of data modeling or data cleansing or the data pipelining piece of it, Alteryx is good. The solutions that they are creating. I also use a test automation tool. It's a separate tool. It's called AxleQ. A lot of banks use it. But again, in a no-code, low-code fashion, trying to teach them how to use a testing tool. Now, can UiPath do most of these things? Yes, it can do. But our job is to also educate students about other things that go very well with UiPath. Alteryx, for example, or Tableau for that matter, a lot of times we've heard that UiPath is, as a solution, it's integrated with these tools. And going back to the point that we're trying to simulate a corporate setting into our classrooms is what we are doing here. I think the students love the fact that they are able to dabble their hands with multiple tools. Again, the focus is not to teach them exactly how to use tools, because guess what? There are enough number of guides out there. There are very nice videos either on UiPath or YouTube and all that can teach them how to use the feature. But then how to interpret a problem and curate a solution. See, universities have one reason to exist, and that one thing that they help with is how to think independently. We are helping our students to think independently as people in the area of process automation or process mining or whatever the whole RPA umbrella encompasses. Process engineering and re-engineering and process mining are also other things that I teach my students. In fact, I use one of these tools to do some process mining as well. But just like Jim, I'm going to use Celonis, thanks to our friend there who's been providing the resources. But yes, process mining is another big area for students. So see, we will always be limited by the 45-hour window. And I think my one thing to the instructors here is figure out what is applicable to what your students want to learn in a way. And then the kind of roles that they are going for, how are those roles changing? Keeping yourself abreast with those changes in the industry is important. I mean, AI is there, you're talking about agentic AI and a lot of related things. Maybe things that we taught 3 years ago might not be something that the students need to learn the same way. So what is the proportion of what they're learning in the class? That changes every year. And ourselves as instructors, if you're not abreast with those changes, I think we're doing a disservice, because at the end of the day, you don't want to teach something, spend the whole semester, and the student goes out and says, by the way, my company already has a full-blown automation set up for it, and I don't think so I'm of any use. Well, we don't want that. So again, going back to the fact that we're teaching them how to be problem solvers, how to think about what solutions need to be. See, the critical thinking aspect cannot be offloaded to AI. Humans will still have to be the critical thinkers. Humans will still have to look at the newer problems that eventual end users are going to have, and that the needs of the users is a moving target. So what we have achieved maturity with in terms of solution is all for the RPA and the tools out there. And that's what our students learn, but they also learn the critical thinking part of it to kind of keep the ball rolling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is super interesting because exactly, what we need right now, it's for students to graduate with the automation mindset, as we call it, and the fact that they are able to navigate these type of problems and become assertive and become resourceful is ultimately, what is allowing them to have a better professional life. So
yeah.
It is very interesting how you're addressing this. And well, thank you. I think we're almost done. So we have probably time for one more question. Let's do the bonus one, just while we're talking about students and the impact that it's having for them. I wanted to share whether you want to share what do you believe the impact that the certifications would have on the students' professional development, or if you have heard from the students or that have responded specifically better to, like probably studio web exercises versus studio, or what aspects have you been able to identify that they find most valuable or challenging?
Yeah, you know, as much as I encourage my students to go and get the additional certifications, um, that's up to them, right? So they're going to get the diplomas through what I've built into my course, and I encourage them to add them to their LinkedIn profiles. Uh, but you know, at the end of the course, we all do. All of our schools have surveys, and I consistently see comments from students that they very much appreciate learning the software tools that we cover, learning where and how to apply them. So they're not just hearing theory, they're getting practical experience around how to apply them to real life solutions. And I agree with Gaurav. I stay connected to the profession. I still have colleagues and former colleagues. And so I know from my experience where and how we applied these types of tools. So they appreciate all that. But at the end of the day, learning the software has been probably one of the most positive, consistent comments. And I mentioned a few of the software tools that we cover. What's more interesting, and I don't get a lot of this, is I do have some students that circle back with me a year or so later, and um, they relate stories like when they were interviewing for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the firm that they were interviewing with used UiPath Studio, and that was a whole line of conversation. And they were able to discuss in depth what they learned and how they applied it in their graduate program, right? And so I don't get those at the end of the course surveys, right? But some students do come back to me, and so I think as they leave, as they graduate and they get further out the year or two into their career, I think it becomes more valuable to them. They realize how important it was. And I have had some cases where, I had a student in the fall and they were interviewing for jobs in the spring and they were still in the program. They weren't taking my course and they reached out to say, hey, you know, this came up and I really appreciate that I was prepared to have that conversation. But I think um, positive confirmation through the surveys at the end of the course, but I don't think they really appreciate it until they actually see for their own eyes. That's why I try to get guest lectures that are still in industry. And like I said, I had a couple guest lectures from EY in the fall, and they showed in their presentation their technology stack. And they had Tableau, they also had Power BI, they had UiPath, they also had Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, and they had Celonis, Alteryx. And now the students start to realize, like, you know what? This isn't just. It's not like we're learning, how to use Excel. We're using powerful tools that are being used in the industry. So, not that learning Excel is not important, but I think, again, in the profession and my ties are to public accounting, they've moved on to the tools. So, I think, it's hard to sit here and say, you know, my students found it hugely valuable, but it just I found course surveys, they always mention it positively. And like I've said, I've had these isolated cases where students have reached back out and said, "Wow, I now realize how powerful this tool is, and because it's being used, right?" So, and I just want to touch on one other thing, and Gaurav touched on it as well. Look, and you guys, Ari, you talked about the evolution of your learning plans. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are in I had a team at KPMG and I lost professionals. They were hired by Accenture to basically um, build dashboards or build automation. That's all they did, right? They were basically building automations. Um, and most of my students don't aspire to go down that very narrow path, right? So to be developers, whatever your prior program was around, that developer certification. So what I try to tell my students is, look, put your role professionally is going to be that role of a business analyst. So you're going to need to understand, you're going to be the bridge between the technologist and the business owner. So you're going to need to understand business processes, controls, etc. If you choose to really concentrate and join a specialty team within your company or within the firm, you can do that, right? But we're trying to build generalist skills that obviously have technology enablement, and you'll choose what path you want to take when you get out there. And so I think, again, we've said it a few times, my advice to educators would be, don't lose sight of what our primary mission is, right? Our mission is to provide that broad education, showing where and how these powerful tools can be integrated and used, but it's not to build technology specialists. That's not our mission, right? Some students may ultimately end up there, but usually that's after a few years of experience. So I think keeping this broad, having them touch a number of these leading practice tools, show where and how they can all interconnect and drive value, I think is hugely important for us as educators. So, I think almost as an ancillary benefit, students get certifications, they get diplomas, right? Even if they didn't get those certifications or diplomas, the fact that they learn to use these tools and apply them in the domain areas that we've taught them about, with our backgrounds, I think is a huge benefit, of huge value to them. If they can get a credential, so be it. But, like I say to my students, you can differentiate yourself. If you have a job already, you can differentiate yourself from your peers if you learn where and how within your organization to apply some of these technology tools. If you don't have a job, you can put yourself ahead of other candidates who have not embraced that. I think there's still, what I see in public accounting, there's still a lack of maturity by the general masses of professionals. They're just not, they're not using it effectively. But if you look at the headlines and the alliances that the firms have made, and I know UiPath has alliances with Deloitte, I'm pretty sure with EY, you probably have them with all the four firms, the big four. You look at the money that the firms are investing in these technology stacks, and a lot of it's in AI. Agentic AI is huge, right? So again, if we look out another 6 to 12 months, if we're not embracing showing where and how our students can apply agentic AI, when you look at what the industry is doing, and literally billions of dollars are being invested by these firms, we're really doing them a disservice, to echo what Gaurav said earlier. I just think, we need to continue to evolve as educators. And, our students may not realize the value of what they're getting now. Sometimes they may express it in the course surveys like I talked about. I think they're going to realize very quickly when they start to work a year or two in industry or in public accounting, wow, this really is all around me, and I'm better prepared now to take that on. I just saw the Wall Street Journal, they had an article that CEOs have finally admitted what everybody suspected and maybe feared, is that AI is going to replace workers, and it's going to replace likely middle management workers. That's not me saying it. I'm telling you what the CEOs have said, and there are studies that also talk about that disruption. But I try to convince my students that, look, we're not in the last year of maturity. This is still in the early days. And so you have an opportunity to embrace this, to apply it, to pair it with your domain knowledge, and really create value for your organization. So this doesn't have to end that you're going to be replaced or you're not going to get a job because of AI, at least in the area that I teach, right? In accounting. But, not every student embraces it, right? The reality is, Gaurav said it, and I see it. In my graduate program, students taking 2, 3, 4 classes at a time. How can you digest everything? They're literally just trying to get through and get a grade. And Unfortunately, I think that's a huge missed opportunity on their part by not really learning how to apply this stuff, where and how to apply it. Because ultimately, okay, maybe it doesn't help them get that first job, but I guarantee you the things that we've been talking about today are going to help them keep that job as you look at how technology is impacting the future of work. So a little bit of a soapbox narrative there, but again, I just believe that yes, I do get positive feedback initially. I
Yeah.
don't have a mechanism to stay in touch, but I would think that if I went to students now that had my course 3 or 4 years ago, and we've had some students send emails saying, "Hey, I got very interested in this through the course, and I decided to focus on it professionally, and it really made a difference for my career." So you get those one-off stories. I think it's more frequent than what we're seeing through those one-off stories. At least I hope that that's the case. So anyway, I look forward to what's coming with the agentic AI and UiPath.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time.
Sorry
but-
about that, Gaurav.
No
I
problem.
rambled on too much. Sorry
No,
about
you
that.
spoke for both of us, so I'm good with that.
But I really, really thank you so much for your feedback, for your insights. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of our professors, and hopefully, we'll have many more of these. But thank you so much for joining us today, your fellow visionary educators. I forgot to add too. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Diana Gray, and at the Community UiPath team for hosting us. And we'll see you. We look forward to seeing what's going to happen next and what you're going to be using next. I'm excited to hear also that you're so looking forward to the agentic automation content that will be coming up. We'll be keeping you posted on that. Thank you so much. And until next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.